Hello, what's good? It's been like what a year? I mean, I think the last drawing thing I did was like February or something, and then there was that Age of Mythology analysis video that was I don't know at some point. I want to say in the later half of last year. Wow, welcome to 2025. I was not. This is not like meant to be a New Year's resolution or anything. Um, I was just drawing this thing, and then was like, I guess. I could record it. I kind of wish I was doing like the Clip Studio like background recording for a time lapse since the beginning, but I didn't do that. Um, so now I'm just gonna do this because some people said they liked it. I think some people are interested in the sketching phase more than line art because it's I don't know early process line art's kind of I don't know self-explanatory. Some people are like oh clean lines, but also like the drawing's kind of like it's not done, but you know what I mean. Like the design's done, the composition's done. Those big things. So like I thought maybe I'll do like a little bit of a walkthrough process. So this started as like I've been watching Yu Yu Hakusho and I guess adding Hiei to my collection of characters that I like. Um, I thought it was so funny because also what I watched before that was Overlord and Demiurge is so greedcore, and I was like, wouldn't it be funny if I just drew a picture of all my favorite characters, and then it was like a lineup of greedcore characters. Um, and then I don't know, the idea just kind of expanded, and now I'm kind of redoing that like this meme that was on Tumblr years back, like. Can you guess my favorite characters? You like draw 10, you don't like write their names or something. I probably will still like write the names. I'll just be like, my 10 favorites. Um, because I realized the last one I did was like 9 years ago, and it needed an update. Um, I don't know where that went. Let me see if I can find it. It's on my other screen, so you can't see it. So just bear with me here. All right, I'm gonna just put this on a new pic. Look at this. Oh my gosh, it's so tiny. So this was like 9 years ago. This was like I guess 9.5 years ago. Um, wow. I'll do a proper analysis of the difference when I finish this, but I saw this and I was like, I should update that. Um, and also just because I wanted to draw my green core characters, because it's like even just with the sketch, it's super funny to me. I'm just like even just looking at their hair, they don't even have color yet. It's painfully obvious what my kinds of favorite characters are. Um, anyways, and also like I didn't want to just do like in that this where it's just like headshots. I didn't want to do that, and like I've seen people like that meme like give me six characters just draw like tons of stuff like this where people have characters pop out of the frame, and I did that once. That like six characters thing. And I had like two characters interacting with each other's frame at one point, and I was like I could do more of that, and also like I just wanted something that was more visually interesting to look at, like I guess I couldn't help in wanting to find a way to challenge myself, both in like giving the characters interesting poses and challenging to have character interaction, and then you add that on top of composition, which is a lot of things, and probably more than I need to do for this, but it's been fun. Um, so like, uh, if I like turn this off, like my first my first sketch really just looks like this. Like it's scribbly. Like it's not really like they're ranked in my order of top favorite. They kind of are, but it's a little bit loose. Like obviously like Greed and Crow are at the front, and then I have some characters down at the bottom. I might have shuffled some more, but it was also in things that like interactions that I think would work well and that were funny and not forced. Because I mean, I guess doesn't really matter since they're kind of crossing over the universe. And then I also wanted to try and not pick like more than one character per franchise. Um, because if I were picking the same series, then like Oikawa would probably be in here, Ling would be in here, but I decided to limit myself to one per like a show or series or something like that. Um, and then after kind of like I shuffled some of these characters at the bottom a couple times. I think Venom was at the side, and then I realized I wanted the framing element to be better, so I kind of split it up and put him in the middle. why did that thing zoom in? I didn't even touch it. So it's a mixture of like figuring out what characters are going to interact with how, and then also having there be like kind of good overall composition, like, like have a tall character, shorter character, tall character, shorter character. I try not to do too much of this where it kind of is all like down in one direction, a little bit more variation. So after I had like this super rough sketch just to like figure out who's going where and the general idea of what they're doing, I did a second pass, which looked more like this, where I like it wasn't getting too picky on like perfect anatomy, but then I realized I didn't want like Hordak here having his gun, so I did a second version where he's actually just like grabbing Venom's tongue. Because my other thought was like to create these little points of interest in the composition. So rather than just having Venom just like there in the back and it just kind of being like oh, he's like annoyed and threatening him with this, like let's make an actual interaction, like maybe his tongue is like dripping on his like shoulder and now he's like pissed off. And then you can have like these characters who are like evil schemers, so I decide to do that thought of like adding little speech bubbles or something, even if I'm not gonna put in dialogue, to like give implication of like a little bit more to the interactions, and to also like fill in some empty space like up in here. So that was the thought that I had for there. But just kind of once I had roughed that out a little bit more, figuring out properly how those were gonna be, I also I'm like that person who does like 5 sketch layers before they do line art. So by the time I got to this point, I had reworked Ye because before he felt like he was a little bit too off the side, even though he's kind of like loner character or whatever. To just do these tiny things of like having Sombra making eye contact with him, and then him looking at what she's pointing at to kind of indicate she's mentioning something to him and whatnot, even if you didn't have these speech bubbles. And it also creates this like there's a lot of rules I'm applying here that are pretty standard in art, that like if you've kind of just done like a basics of or something, or probably done in illustration like how-to videos or comic or whatever, you get a lot of this thing about the 3-point read, where it's like they kind of make a triangle of 3 points of interest so that the viewer bounces between those 3 things. And so we're kind of following her eyes to his eyes to the hand, and in almost in a way of the hand, it takes you back up, like this angle can take you back up. So then it keeps the viewer kind of in the engagement of the picture. Bon isn't as much in there, but we're still having him interact with it by her leaning mostly towards him, and him still looking at more of what she's actually doing as well. And then like him pointing as well. That's kind of a little bit of what I had tried to do here. It's not as, I would say, solid as this, but given that we have this negative space, that's why this will help, whereas these two are closer together. This has got a similar thing. We got eye contact, direction. So we're kind of like adding more of these kind of little points of interest into the like overall picture, rather than just drawing like, character standing. I mean, they could be doing poses that's reflective of their own personality, and then maybe still have them pop out of frame. But I thought it was more interesting to kind of create like a challenge myself to have these little like say some people say like create little stories in your drawings, creating narrative, even in something like crossover where it makes no sense, but in a way that makes it more fun. So then like for here we got the same thing, like they're gonna have the little speech bubbles that are facing each other instead of facing forward, and then while I don't have them making eye contact with each other because that's just how, like, he's got glasses, you're not going to see, I also wanted to make sure that Venom was a bit more engaged than he was before, where he was just in the back. So he's like, it's implied that they're having conversation about like haha evil stuff and then like interested in like kind of like Venom being there. So she's kind of like making a remark, he's unsure, but then there's also this like dragged interaction of like going into Hordak, with the tongue, which I think works better because he's facing this way, but there's still an interaction happening this way. Because since Venom's such a big character, we're not having as much crossover like we have with Sombra going over these two panels, and that was kind of my way to compromise it. I don't think it works as well as I think this, but the fact that Venom is kind of like framing this whole page, you know, we make do with the best we can. And then this part though I do like is the tongue goes down to here, then it goes into the hand, and then we have this swoop of like hand, and then like you loop back around because like just like the curve of his shape here, and then we got that little thing going on where we're keeping the interest in here after you kind of follow through this, right? So like Demiurge, Medusa, Venom, blah blah blah. I mean that's not perfect like flow line, but you get the idea. But this was kind of unintentional, but it was like okay, like Garrick is maybe showing him like some awesome threads because he's a tailor, and maybe Hordak needs a new fashion update now that Venom's dripping all over his outfit. So I thought that was kind of fun, and so then you can have like them interact, and it's also like characters that I thought would have fun. So I kind of call this like the thieves' corner, people who be stealing or criminal issues. My schemers corner, my alien characters, followed by aliens with medical implant issues, and also not living up to family expectation issues. And then, honestly, what did I think of that dynamic again? How did I put it? It was like, kind of like snarky, provocative characters, but also with dumbass energy. So that's kind of how I want to pair it off. I mean, if I was trying to be really, really intense about it, I would probably put the 3 character interaction here and then the 3 other 3 character interaction here on this side to put a little bit more balance rather than the 2, and 3. But because we have this being almost 3 faces, and this is a little bit secondary. But you know, I got like 10 characters in this picture, so there's only so much we can do at once. I'm doing the best I can. So that's my little like breakdown analysis of like this composition picture thing of my favorite characters, which by the end of this, I think it's once I get all the lines done, it's gonna yeah, my Greed Core character is really gonna show. It's literally just who are my favorite characters? Greed Core plus sneaky ladies. That's what this is. Whereas this one, I know I was trying to force myself to find characters to fit 10 because it's like, yeah, there's lots of characters I like, but at the time, this was when we only had season 1 of Attack on Titan. And I was like, well, there's not many characters that like, you know, like you get feral about, like you get really, really intense about. Haikyuu changed my brain chemistry, so we got Kuro, Bond, like tons of these characters are ones that I didn't know about at the time, so like that's a shift. But now like these ones where it's like trying to find, I was trying to find characters that were a little bit different and would stand out in terms of like their personality and how different they are, whereas this I think it's more, they're more similar. I'm less ashamed that my taste is very consistent. It's all about indulgence, and that's really what this is. I haven't drawn anything properly in forever. It was time. It's been time to draw just indulgent characters. I don't think I'll go too much in another conversation about like what's going on here. I mean, I could get really nitpicky about like when I was moving things over, making sure there's no tangents and like parts that overlap awkward. Like if I were gonna do a talk and draw, like real time talk and draw, I'd probably make comments about that. But I don't know if I'm gonna finish this at a time where I feel comfortable talking for that long. This would be like a 5-hour video, so I'll probably just screen record it and put it in as time lapse. Okay, so you know how I said I was like, oh, I'll just time lapse record, and then I immediately changed my mind because I threw my food in the oven, and by the time it's like done cooking, like it's not enough time to get in the flow state for doing the line art for another character. So I figured I'm gonna do something else here. Okay, actually let's just put these guys in a group. Go like this. even is on these layers? I don't know. So like, I realized there's another thing I want to mention, which is like posing, like it, not just in like what they're doing and how they're interacting, but something that at least I found is kind of funny but annoying is it's easier to do poses for, I'd say, more, what's the word I'm looking for? Like more grander expressions or more action. Like if I were to do a character who's like gonna throw in a punch, like I think it's easier almost in a sense because I'm like used to really pushing the dynamics of like, you know, what they're doing and like adding extra emphasis to action. Like anything that allows you to play with elements like you get this in animation a lot, like like they call like the squish and stretch, you know, like that, like he's stretching his mouth there versus like really squinty mouth, like to exaggerate rather than when something's neutral. And what I mean by that is like I read this post like ages ago, and it was someone who said there's nothing more difficult than trying to draw a character who's just standing there. Which is funny because I work in concept art, and often you're just drawing characters just standing there, like to do the turnaround. But to do the character that's just standing there and not like just an A or T pose, but also is still showing their personality, that's the hard part. So like we're gonna take an example. Like Sombra was somehow really easy to draw here because I drew her a lot in my Mega Overwatch phase, and I was just like, all right, she got like like push the sassy hips, like something like that, like she's got her other leg that way, and then so we're getting already like this, and then her hands doing something, and like I already knew in a sense that that's what I wanted her to do, and it came very naturally. Versus like he who's not as expressive with his body is just like standing there, but how do I make it so it's not stiff as well? And even if I didn't have him like, like holding the jacket, that was a throwaway because it just worked better for framing. Like before I just had him like hands in pockets. And there's this very simple thing rather than just like hands in pockets, but um in a lot of like gesture drawing classes or stuff you'll hear, they'll tell you, draw the rib cage first and then the pelvis, and then you draw in like the legs and everything else, right? Like because that implies kind of the perspective and angle of the whole body. So if you're taking like a rib cage that's going like here, right? You go down and we're like, you're doing that. This is like how you get a head that's there. And now we're gonna have like that perspective where it's like this, right? And then like legs down there, something like that. But it doesn't have to be as extreme as that. It can be a lot more subtle. So for something like this, it was, well, is he going to be more slouching forward? Like is he going to be leaning forward with kind of like a more sulking thing? Or is he got a little bit of ego, a little proud? So maybe he's turned away from the other person. His shoulders are relaxed, but like we're gonna have like his chest pop out a bit more. He's more upright in his stance, which says something about his character. Like he's not timid or shy, but he's closed off in the way that he's gonna face away, or like he's very nonchalant. So his instead of it being like his shoulders are like popped up like this, like he's really tense, his shoulders are relaxed. And that seems like a super super basic pose, but it tells so much about a character. So you compare that to something like even like here, uh this one was another one. So like similar idea where I was like, okay, popping him up forward, very proud, but he's gonna be like that. Versus like, a lot of characters I do that because I guess that's the kind of characters I like. But this is a bigger difference is though in another context, Kuro would probably be drawn more like this or like this. He's in this situation where he's a little uncomfortable. So he's before I had him a lot more like upright and just like holding it very straight, and he was just standing upward and like looking very awkwardly in the first sketch. And then I realized it would be more interesting to have him like he's kind of like pulling away. He's a little bit more like like leaning back, like, and you put your like as if you're tucking your chin into your neck, rather than like if you're curious, you're going to stretch out you're gonna like kind of pop out more like that. You're gonna be looking into the thing, like you're leaning into it in interest, as opposed to leaning away but still looking like kind of wary. And so while most of these characters kind of like, like they're got that more like upright thing, something more subtle, like it's he's front facing, he's slightly to the side, but instead this is where he's doing that part where he's hunching his shoulders up like he's a little nervous. And now that's where, even though it's super super subtle, his rib cage is a little bit more turned down because he's like trying to get away, or he like, like not cowering in fear, but like, when you kind of like hunch into yourself, a little bit protective. That's kind of what I want to bring in. So the same thing goes with like he's holding the ball closer to himself on this side, leaning away, and this part's going to pop out more, which actually worked in the framing, so that like instead of his shoulders being like up perfectly, we get this angle for here, and his shoulder slots a lot nicer into bonds like this. So then we get that shape a lot better. So that was just like another little thing. And so it's the same thing with Bond, like, he's a little bit more like hunching because like he's little tall, he's trying to lean in, um kind of like weird, lanky, gangly kind of person anyways. So these very subtle differences. Same thing with like Garrick. I wanted him to kind of be more like he's introducing something to someone. So he's showing off like this fabric. So he's gonna have his like, we're gonna have slight difference in like his little bit perspective here. This hand's gonna be closer, this is farther away. So he's like kind of really showing it off, but like, so he's leaning away from him to give him space, but he's also kind of got his hand close to kind of bring him in, like, look at this thing, like slight tilted head. There's all these little tiny things that I try to think about in what will not just help sell the character themselves, but the interaction and those tiny little things in their posture, which is why like I'm probably even gonna have to do another proper pass on Hiei, because I'm not quite happy. It's the right way I want to go with it, but there's just very subtle things that I know when with how this is when I get into the line. I'm gonna want to go back to my sketch pencil, because this was with my line pen, to figure that out. Because when I was doing like, the doodles, I did it with these fine lines, but I also do this thicker brush, because for some reason just like it triggers that part of my brain to think more about those bigger shapes and worry less about specifics. And I'll start thinking about like, how's this gonna flow into here, how's this gonna flow into here, how do I make sure that I have this kind of flow like this for the arms here, and how's this gonna like add into that. And I really try to think about those with a proper pass, so I know if I go straight into line for him with how this is, I mean, I could give it a shot, but I think it's going to be a little bit stiff, even though I have kind of very sharp angular lines as well. I would say that's kind of like how I think you might want to think about it. Like, try and do the opposite of what the final is going to be. So since I tend to have sharper angular lines, I want to push, these softer, and like not worrying about anatomy, like where's the elbow, but like that, more about that specific stuff later, and think more about like that general stuff, because once you start doing the line, it will kind of start building in the structure. I don't know if you could do it the other way, where if you tend to do like softer flowy line art, that doing stiff sketch would be better. Like, I don't want to say stiff sketch, but like using like if I were to do like my sketch with this pencil, right? Like how this is, and then do the lines with this pen, or like a pen like it. I mean, it could be interesting. It could work, maybe. It all depends. But this is why a lot of people tend to say like think with bigger strokes and stuff like that for gesture drawing. Get those bigger shapes, because then you can get stuff like this, right? That's pulling in this and thinking about these other little things, right? I don't know, I'm just blabbering at that point, but those were some thoughts that I had, because it's super subtle, and I think it's easy to miss like the difference between a pose like this and this and this, you know? Like, he's got a little bit more point here in this, versus this going to be more down, even though both their chests are going to be a little bit more proud of chest. Their shoulders are saying a different thing. that sort of tons of little things. I'm not gonna go into like whole gesture like drawing tutorial, but you know, whatever works, whatever floats your boat, whatever gets your brain cranking, I guess. Um, yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'll talk more once I've eaten my food, or I will actually just do the speed paint thing. Undetermined. But thanks for listening anyways. I hope it was interesting.